Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. Aristotle's Challenge. Anyone can become angry, that is easy. But to be angry with the right person to the right degree at the right time for the right purpose and in the right way, that is not easy. Aristotle, the Nicomachean Ethics. It was an unbearably steamy August afternoon in New York City, the kind of sweaty day that makes people sullen with discomfort. I was heading back to a hotel, and as I stepped onto a bus up Madison Avenue, I was startled by the driver, a middle-aged black man with an enthusiastic smile who welcomed me with a friendly, "Hi, how you doing?" as I got on, a greeting he proffered to everyone else who entered as the bus wormed through the thick midtown traffic. Each passenger was as startled as I, and, locked into the morose mood of the day, few returned his greeting. But as the bus crawled uptown through the gridlock, a slow, rather magical transformation occurred. The driver gave a running monologue for our benefit, a living commentary on the passing scene around us. There was a terrific sale at that store, a wonderful exhibit at this museum. Did you hear about the new movie that just opened at that cinema down the block? His delight in the rich possibilities the city offered was infectious. By the time people got off the bus, each in turn had shaken off the sullen shell they had entered with, and when the driver shouted out a "So long, have a great day," each gave a smiling response. The memory of that encounter has stayed with me for close to 20 years. When I rode that Madison Avenue bus, I had just finished my own doctorate in psychology, but there was scant attention paid in the psychology of the day to just how such a transformation could happen. Psychological science knew little or nothing of the mechanics of emotion. And yet, imagining the spreading virus of good feeling that must have rippled through the city, starting from passengers on his bus, I saw that this driver was an urban peacemaker of sorts, wizard-like in his power to transmute the sullen irritability that seethed in his passengers, to soften and open their hearts a bit. In stark contrast, some items from this week's paper. At a local school, a 9-year-old goes on a rampage, pouring paint over school desks, computers, and printers, and vandalizing a car in the school parking lot. The reason? Some third-grade classmates called him a baby, and he wanted to impress them. 8 youngsters are wounded when an inadvertent bump in a crowd of teenagers milling outside a Manhattan rap club leads to a shoving match, which ends when one of those affronted starts shooting a .38 caliber automatic handgun into the crowd. The report notes that such shootings over seemingly minor slights, which are perceived as acts of disrespect, have become increasingly common around the country in recent years. For murder victims under 12, says a report, 57% of the murderers are their parents or step-parents. In almost half the cases, the parents say that they were merely trying to discipline the child. The fatal beatings were prompted by infractions such as the child blocking the TV, crying, or soiling diapers. A German youth is on trial for murdering 5 Turkish women and girls in a fire he set while they slept. Part of a neo-Nazi group, he tells of failing to hold jobs, of drinking, of blaming his hard luck on foreigners. In a barely audible voice, he pleads, "I can't stop being sorry for what we've done, and I'm infinitely ashamed." Each day's news comes to us rife with such reports of the disintegration of civility and safety, an onslaught of mean-spirited impulse running amok. But the news simply reflects back to us on a larger scale a creeping sense of emotions out of control in our lives and in those of the people around us. No one is insulated from this erratic tide of outburst and regret. It reaches into all of our lives in one way or another. The last decade has seen a steady drumroll of reports like these, portraying an uptick in emotional ineptitude, desperation, and recklessness in our families, our communities, and our collective lives. These years have chronicled surging rage and despair, whether in the quiet loneliness of latchkey kids left with a TV for a babysitter, or in the pain of children abandoned, neglected, or abused, or in the ugly intimacy of marital violence. A spreading emotional malaise can be read in numbers showing a jump in depression around the world, and in the reminders of a surging tide of aggression. Teens with guns in schools, freeway mishaps ending in shootings, disgruntled ex-employees massacring former fellow workers. Emotional abuse, drive-by shooting, and post-traumatic stress all entered the common lexicon over the last decade. as the slogan of the hour shifted from the cheery, "Have a nice day," to the testiness of "Make my day." This book is a guide to making sense of the senselessness. As a psychologist, and for the last decade as a journalist for the New York Times, I have been tracking the progress of our scientific understanding of the realm of the irrational. From that perch, I have been struck by two opposing trends, one portraying a growing calamity in our shared emotional life, the other offering some hopeful remedies. Why this exploration now? The last decade, despite its bad news, has also seen an unparalleled burst of scientific studies of emotion. Most dramatic are the glimpses of the brain at work, made possible by innovative methods such as new brain imaging technologies. They have made visible, for the first time in human history, what has always been a source of deep mystery, exactly how this intricate mass of cells operates while we think and feel, imagine and dream. This flood of neurobiological data lets us understand more clearly than ever how the brain's centers for emotion move us to rage or to tears, and how more ancient parts of the brain, which stir us to make love as well as war, are channeled for better or worse. This unprecedented clarity on the workings of emotions and their failings brings into focus some fresh remedies for our collective emotional crisis. I've had to wait till now before the scientific harvest was full enough to write this book. These insights are so late in coming, largely because the place of feeling in mental life has been surprisingly slighted by research over the years, leaving the emotions a largely unexplored continent for scientific psychology. Into this void has rushed a welter of self-help books, well-intentioned advice based at best on clinical opinion, but lacking much, if any, scientific basis. Now science is finally able to speak with authority to these urgent and perplexing questions of the psyche at its most irrational, to map with some precision the human heart. This mapping offers a challenge to those who subscribe to a narrow view of intelligence, arguing that IQ is a genetic given that cannot be changed by life experience, and that our destiny in life is largely fixed by these aptitudes. That argument ignores the more challenging question: what can we change that will help our children fare better in life? What factors are at play, for example, when people of high IQ flounder and those of modest IQ do surprisingly well? I would argue that the difference quite often lies in the abilities called here emotional intelligence, which includes self-control, zeal and persistence, and the ability to motivate oneself. And these skills, as we shall see, can be taught to children, giving them a better chance to use whatever intellectual potential the genetic lottery may have given them. Beyond this possibility looms a pressing moral imperative. These are times when the fabric of society seems to unravel at ever greater speed, when selfishness, violence, and a meanness of spirit seem to be rotting the goodness of our communal lives. Here, the argument for the importance of emotional intelligence hinges on the link between sentiment, character, and moral instincts. There is growing evidence that fundamental ethical stances in life stem from underlying emotional capacities. For one, impulse is the medium of emotion. The seed of all impulse is a feeling bursting to express itself in action. Those who are at the mercy of impulse, who lack self-control, suffer a moral deficiency. The ability to control impulse is the base of will and character. By the same token, the root of altruism lies in empathy, the ability to read emotions in others. Lacking a sense of another's need or despair, there is no caring. And if there are any two moral stances that our times call for, they are precisely these: self-restraint and compassion. Our journey. In this book, I serve as a guide and a journey through these scientific insights into the emotions, a voyage aimed at bringing greater understanding to some of the most perplexing moments in our lives and in the world around us. The journey's end is to understand what it means and how to bring intelligence to emotion. This understanding itself can help to some degree. Bringing cognizance to the realm of feeling has an effect something like the impact of an observer at the quantum level in physics, altering what is being observed. Our journey begins in part 1 with new discoveries about the brain's emotional architecture that offer an explanation of those most baffling moments in our lives when feeling overwhelms all rationality. Understanding the interplay of brain structures that rule our moments of rage and fear, or passion and joy, reveals much about how we learn the emotional habits that can undermine our best intentions, as well as what we can do to subdue our more destructive or self-defeating emotional impulses. Most important, the neurological data suggests a window of opportunity for shaping our children's emotional habits. The next major stop on our journey, part 2 of this book, is in seeing how neurological givens play out in the basic flair for living called emotional intelligence, being able, for example, to rein in emotional impulse, to read another's innermost feelings, to handle relationships smoothly, as Aristotle put it, the rare skill to be angry with the right person to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way. Readers who are not drawn to neurological detail may want to proceed directly to this section. This expanded model of what it means to be intelligent puts emotions at the center of aptitudes for living. Part 3 examines some key differences this aptitude makes, how these abilities can preserve our most prized relationships, or their lack corrode them, how the market forces that are reshaping our work life are putting an unprecedented premium on emotional intelligence for on-the-job success, and how toxic emotions put our physical health at as much risk as does chain smoking, even as emotional balance can help protect our health and well-being. Our genetic heritage endows each of us with a series of emotional set points that determines our temperament. But the brain circuitry involved is extraordinarily malleable. Temperament is not destiny. As Part 4 shows, the emotional lessons we learn as children at home and at school shape the emotional circuits, making us more adept or inept at the basics of emotional intelligence. This means that childhood and adolescence are critical windows of opportunity for setting down the essential emotional habits that will govern our lives. Part 5 explores what hazards await those who, in growing to maturity, fail to master the emotional realm, how deficiencies in emotional intelligence heighten a spectrum of risks, from depression or a life of violence to eating disorders and drug abuse, and it documents how pioneering schools are teaching children the emotional and social skills they need to keep their lives on track. Perhaps the most disturbing single piece of data in this book comes from a massive survey of parents and teachers, and shows a worldwide trend for the present generation of children to be more troubled emotionally than the last, more lonely and depressed, more angry and unruly, more nervous and prone to worry, more impulsive and aggressive. If there is a remedy, I feel it must lie in how we prepare our young for life. At present, we leave the emotional education of our children to chance, with ever more disastrous results. One solution is a new vision of what schools can do to educate the whole student, bringing together mind and heart in the classroom. Our journey ends with visits to innovative classes that aim to give children a grounding in the basics of emotional intelligence. I can foresee a day when education will routinely include inculcating essential human competencies such as self-awareness, self-control, and empathy, and the arts of listening, resolving conflicts, and cooperation. In the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle's philosophical inquiry into virtue, character, and the good life, his challenge is to manage our emotional life with intelligence. Our passions, when well exercised, have wisdom. They guide our thinking, our values, our survival, but they can easily go awry, and they do so all too often. As Aristotle saw, the problem is not with emotionality, but with the appropriateness of emotion and its expression. The question is, how can we bring intelligence to our emotions, and civility to our streets, and caring to our communal life?